Hey gang, welcome back to Dad's Garage. Today's video is a maintenance video. Now most of my videos deal with doing restoration type work on Mustangs and Camaros, but I also do mechanical stuff on vehicles for friends of mine and even my own personal vehicles. Today's video I'm going to be replacing a wheel hub on a 2007 Dodge Durango. It appears it's wearing out, which is not uncommon, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to change that. The one I'm using today is from FKG UK Bearings. This is available on Amazon. I will post a link in the description below, so if you want one, you can go get one. This one is a complete hub, even with the ABS sensor on it. And this one is for either a front-wheel drive type of vehicle or a four-wheel drive vehicle, as it has a spline shaft in the center for your axle. This one is a two-wheel drive, so it shouldn't be that hard. And the way you do this, I'll show you, is there's only 3 bolts that hold the hub itself to the vehicle. So let's take a look at the problem with it and how I'm going to address it. To start this job, I'm going to jack up the right front, which is where the problem is. When you do this, make sure you have your parking brake set and have a jack stand ready so you can put it underneath the vehicle. I'm using the main cross member at the front, and jack stand is underneath the frame of the vehicle itself. Now I want to show you what's going on with this wheel. So when my friend is driving this vehicle, she said when she's on the interstate and she would hit a bump or something, it would want to pull the vehicle to the right. And so she had to be very careful when she was driving it. Now I've already looked at the tie rod ends and stuff like that. They're okay. But you can grab the wheel. I don't know if you can hear that or not. And it's got some wiggle to it. You can also grab it top and bottom. There's a lot more movement. See if I can show you here. Kind of plane that across. I don't know if it'll show up on the video or not. You can see that movement now. And that's top to bottom. That's pivoting like this. So that's what lets me know that the wheel bearing is bad. So I'm going to get the wheel off and take a look at the steps to change out that hub. Alright, with the wheel off, this is what you're looking at. You've got the brake rotor, you've got the caliper, and the caliper bracket. You can see here's the lug nuts or studs, and then here's the spline shaft that I talked about if you had a four-wheel drive vehicle. Now, to do this, you're going to need to remove the bracket and the caliper. Some people, they remove this as an assembly. It's easier for them. For me, I'm going to remove the caliper itself and then remove the bracket. It just makes it a little bit easier to have less mass to move around. Now when you do this, you're going to need a 13mm wrench to take the nut loose on the caliper, and then you may need a 17mm, and I'll show you why. Now I have the wheel turned to the right just to give more access, but if you take the 13mm, put it on the bolt, there is an internal bolt, let's say, that has a 17mm fitting. So what I normally do is I take a mallet. I don't like to use my hands to smack things. So I'm going to break that loose, being careful I don't hit anything else. There. And this is what I was talking about. Sometimes you may need to use a 17 to hold this still while you take out the 13. Set that aside. Do the same thing down below. I'm just going to try it with the wrench and the mallet. Now we live in the South, so a lot of this stuff isn't rusted or corroded. If you're up in the Rust Belt, this may be more of a challenge. Okay, I'm going to take that loose. Another thing you'll have to consider is when you're doing this, and I probably should have addressed this first, when you're doing this you may need to recompress the caliper slightly. One idea that I've seen, and it may not work as well since I took the bolts out, but you could put pressure on the pistons with a screwdriver, just a little, push those back in. Sometimes it doesn't. Use some leverage to help it come off. So it may be better to just compress the pistons after taking it off. But this is what I was talking about. If you're trying to do the caliper and the bracket at the same time, you could run into problems. So I'm going to set this up on top of the control arm. And now we can see not far off from needing new brake pads. Get those out of the way. So now you can see the other bolts that hold the bracket. So these happen to be a 13/16. So I'm going to put my wrench on and use my mallet again. Now these normally have Loctite on them, so it may take some effort to get them out. Now the bracket comes off. At this point, the rotor comes off. There's nothing else holding it. Just slide it off. Hear that? Yep. Now the next thing we need to remove is the 3 bolts that are in the back. Kind of hard to show you those, but those are an 18 millimeter. So I'm going to use a breaker bar and break those loose. Now again, we live in the South. You may have more trouble with yours if you live up in another area of the country. Now, I don't see any Loctite on these, but I will probably add some. Now at this point, there's a couple different techniques you can use to get this off. I've seen people drive a chisel in between here. Again, we're in the South. I'm going to see if this works. I left one bolt in so it doesn't fly off and hit me in the foot or something. Then I'm just going to hit this with a mallet. So that's loose. Now, before I take that all the way off, identify that there is a ABS sensor. So that comes up behind here. You've got a push pin holding that together. Follow it back. It comes all the way up to the apron, let's say, or the fender liner up here. So I have to disconnect that. I'm going to pull that out of the fender liner. And there you have your connection. Hopefully you can see that okay. Now this has a lock on it, this little red piece. I don't know if you can see that very well. Then it has to slide out. I may need a screwdriver to do that, but that has to slide out so that you can depress the release button. See if I can push that. There it goes. And now I can push on the release, pull that out. Now this point, you just snake it out of the connectors. Little clips. There's like a U-shaped clip behind the shock absorber here. Pull it out of that. There's another one right here. Just pull it out of that. And try to remember the routing. That way you're not fighting with it later. Now this clip is a little different. It is like a Christmas tree, but it looks like it's a complete loop. So I'll have to pull that one out. I have this body shop tool. So there you can see the shape a little, like a little Christmas tree. Okay, now that should be it. So let me take the bolt. So if I take this bolt the rest of the way out now, and there's the hub. And of course you want to keep that dust shield. Remember how that was on like that. Now just because I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and clean up this opening. There we go. Now of course it's always a good idea to do a side-by-side comparison before you install the new one. This one has a cord connected with a zip tie here back on itself, so I'll cut that loose, verify this length. So that looks good, plenty. Also take a look at the connector at the end, because you don't want to be installing and realize this isn't going to fit. Has the loop pieces, little drums let's say, and also the same Christmas tree. So everything looks good. Just a quick comparison on the studs. Yep, good to go. Okay, everything's ready to go back together. As I said, I'm going to put a little Loctite onto these bolts. I've seen other people actually put like anti-seize on these, and I understand that. Based on where he lives, it may be beneficial to put anti-seize on. I'm just going to put some Loctite on here just to satisfy me. And also, I've looked up online and I found that the torque spec, at least what I found on a Dodge forum, is these bolts are to be torqued to 125 foot-pounds. I saw somebody else that did it at 120, but going by the Dodge forum, it would be 125. So I'm going to set this up here. Let me get this out of the way. Set this in place. And I have to feed the wire back through the pan here. And of course get that lined up with that opening on the dust shield. So I'll get these snugged in and then come back with the torque wrench. Okay, so I have my torque wrench set. Okay, those are done. Alright, now I want to run the wire. It's going to come around behind and go back into the hole at the top of the knuckle here. So That's going to go in there. And then we'll connect to the next fitting. Come around behind. And just kind of follow it back up to where it connects into the main connector on that side. This should only fit one way. Put that back together, slide that little red piece back in so it locks in, come back up and install it in the fender liner. And that's it for that. That's much better. Okay, now what I want to do is put the rotor back on, make sure it's clean, you don't have any oil or anything caught up on the back side of it. Get that in place. And then we're going to put the caliper bracket back on. Now this isn't a brake job video, but I want to show you a couple things. Make sure these sliders move nicely. Again, I'm in the south, so we don't really have a problem. But if you need to, you can take these apart, clean them up, and put some grease on them, and they'll be good to go. The bolts, I did a little research online, and I'm still going to put some Loctite on these. But the numbers I found on these for a torque spec was 130 foot-pounds. Again, any of this stuff that I'm telling you as far as torques and stuff like that, I recommend that you look it up on your own so that you have your own verification there. So I'm going to put a little Loctite on these. Again, these were 13/16. I'm going to snug those down. Okay, so I'm getting ready to put the caliper back in place. And as I mentioned before, you may need to compress these slightly. Now, this is just an old brake pad I had from another job. I would put this in here, and I have this caliper compressor. It's just a threaded plate. Pretty simple. You can pick these up at any parts store. And all I want to do is press these in just a little bit. Now, you could use a C-clamp. You could use a big pair of C-shaped, vice grips. And all I'm doing is bring them in just enough that I can get clearance on the brake pads. I have a feeling I'll be putting brake pads on this soon, but not today. Now I want to put the pads back in place. So they have these little spring clips. Get that lined up. And what those actually do is put tension on to pull the pad away. It's supposed to help reduce wear. It may work. I don't know. And then put the caliper back in place. You have to squeeze those pads in. The tricky part is lining up on the sliders at the same time, because sometimes you have to push those in a little to get the clearance. There we go. Again, 13 millimeter, and you may need a 17 to hold the retainer. Now I don't know what the torque is on these. I just make them tight with my hand. That should be it. Basically, put your wheel back on and apply your brakes a couple times. Make sure you fill the caliper back up with fluid if you press any out, and that should do it. So that'll be the end of this video. I hope you found some information that may help you with doing repairs on your vehicle. And I want to point out one small detail. On that hub flange, I had a slight problem with the wheel fitting back on. Now I don't know if those hubs have different tolerances or if the wheels may have a different tolerance, but I had a little bit of a problem putting the wheel back on. I had to take a sander and just skim the inside of that opening, and then the wheel went on okay. Just pointing that out. So if you can, maybe do a test fit. If you're going to order one of these hubs, take the wheel off the vehicle, take the hub and put it in the wheel and see if it binds. If it goes in, fine, you're good to go. If it doesn't go in, there may be something wrong and you may need to return that hub. Just letting you know, I want to share as much information as I can when I'm doing these projects. But I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you would, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what you think about this video. And until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.